Hi, my name is Hannah File. My project is on VRE, vancomycin resistant enterococci. So firstly, what is enterococci? Entero means intestines, and cocci, what we learned in microbiology, means round. So in layman's term, enterococci means it's a round bacteria that lives in our gut. It adds up to be less than 1% of our microbiota. Actually, we only found out about 58 recognized species of enterococci, but the most common one that we actually face is called the Enterococcus faecalis. And I'm actually not going to go too big into it, but it's actually shortened to E. faecalis, and it's a name that you're going to see a little bit throughout the slides. So is Enterococcus dangerous? So yes and no. If you're healthy and the bacteria stays in your gut, you should be fine because the bacteria really plays as an opportunist. It doesn't pose a big problem unless someone is immunocompromised. E. faecalis infections can occur through gut translocation, poor hand hygiene, because this bacteria can be found in our feces and it can be found on our hands. So it's important to, wash our hands because it can get in our food, water, surfaces at our work, such as our computer, doorknobs, work phones. So make sure people to wash their hands. All right, so in the 1940s, the whole big thing of penicillin, and I had to use a photo of Oprah. You get antibiotics, everyone's getting antibiotics, which was a big deal at that time. And then, suddenly bacteria started developing penicillinases and beta-lactamases, and basically these are like little molecular scissors, and it cuts right through the penicillin and its nucleus. So of course, the bacteria started to have a resistance to penicillin. So after penicillin had a bacterial resistance, we threw methicillin at it, and of course, bacteria evolved, and then people were having a resistance to this bacteria, and it ended up becoming a methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which you'll hear a lot in the medical field, called MRSA. Now, back in the 80s, which, quite frankly wasn't that long ago, this resistance to methicillin actually became a gateway to vancomycin. So how does vancomycin work? So vancomycin comes from the term to vanquish. It only works against gram-positive bacteria, so it is a narrow spectrum antibiotic. So take a look at this photo over here. This is our gram-positive bacteria. Here's our cell membrane. It's our cell wall. I'm not going to go into on these vocabulary here, but right now we're going to focus on this guy. This is Bob. Bob is our transglycolysis, and what he's doing is trying to bond the cell wall. And then by doing so, it causes the bacteria to replicate and get scarier and worse. So when we give our patients vancomycin, what happens is that it basically blocks the protein and prevents cell wall synthesis. So we're basically keeping Bob doing his job, and it damages and destroys the cell wall and kills off the bad bacteria. So when taking antibiotics, of course, superbug has to come back and bacteria evolves once again, and we develop resistance. So in this case here, when we're taking vancomycin to destroy MRSA, now it does take a lot of vancomycin to get to this point, we're also exposing to the bacteria called E. faecalis. Now, when taking this antibiotic, the vancomycin kills the bacteria that does not have a resistance mechanism, and the only thing that survives are the ones that does develop the resistance to the antibiotic. And when that happens, we develop a new emerging pathogen, and we call it vancomycin resistance enterococci. And so this is where we're at. It is something that happened, actually still, I would still say it's quite recent. It happened in the 1980s, the first recorded situation with VRE. So it is an emerging thing that we're dealing with still to this day, especially in hospitals. Society pressure with antibiotic issues. Ventola stated that in the National Library of Medicine that incorrect prescribed antibiotics continues to promote resistance to bacteria. My question is, why is antibiotics being pushed in society if it's not necessary? This is a really great read, and I have it in my reference with Dr. Feller mentioning that medical doctors are likely to prescribe antibiotics even if they're not needed to make patients to feel like something needs to be done to make them feel better. So they have a cold, it's a virus, they want something, they don't want to be told go home, write it out. Here, take an antibiotic, it'll make you feel better, and they go home, they feel better, and what happens? They think it's the antibiotic, but really they're just trying to write out the virus. So doctors, they constantly tell people it's not the antibiotics, but it's just seems like for them an unnecessary, daunting task that they have to go through. So it's a really great read, so take an opportunity to read if you can. Here are my references, and thank you for your time.